The opportunity is if you're looking to get started or you don't have the capital, you can be the person who goes and does that. Like if you got time,
I could use a guy like that. Anybody wants to call me.
You've got to have, time, money, and skills to find investment property. I always tell people choose two.
Yeah.
You can have money and time and you can make up for skills, or you can have time and skills and you can make up for money.
There you go. That's very wise. Yeah.
But let's get back to your journey. So you told us about forming capital and then
so after that I like I said, lifestyle change and just time to be more entrepreneurial. I started a property management business.
When was that? What year?
That was 2014. Yeah, 2014.
I love these podcasts because I get to learn more about people I know so well
Right?
already.
You think you know him so well, and I didn't even know he's a Florida native. Like that. But 2014, cool.
So 2014, I started property management business. From scratch. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I had, this is probably a recurring theme. I think it's my personality, but I had just decided I'm going to be more entrepreneurial. I'm going to do this. I was fortunate to be in a financial position to be able to just do that.
We all kind of did that. You were working at a corporate firm. And I was working for General Electric.
I got fed up.
Yeah, we all kind of left and went on to the entrepreneurial thing.
And so at that time, I owned duplexes and triplexes. I'd been fortunate to just do some of my own investing. And I was sort of said, I'm managing these myself. I could probably turn this into a business. And I sort of thought about going back into residential sales because, like I said, I got the family connection. My mom and my aunt had the independent brokerage, but I wasn't ready to go there, coming from corporate and investing. And, I was like, am I going to be a real estate agent? Which, ends up coming back to be relevant to the story that I didn't want to be a real estate agent. But so I started the property management business. No clients other than I was my first client. And just hit the ground, hit the pavement, called for rent by owner signs, went and door knocked and found landlords to talk to, and went to networking events and real estate investment clubs and did presentations and built up a portfolio. So we went from, we grew extremely quickly. So it started in, I believe, October of 2014. And by the summer of 2015, we were managing 260 units.
It's crazy, crazy growth, crazy.
Yeah.
It takes some people a whole career to get to that.
Yeah, so we were
20 years.
3 counties. We were doing Palm Beach, Broward County, and then St. Lucie County. We were up in Fort Pierce as well. And so it was a ton of growth really quickly. I made my wife, she was a teacher. I made her, stop teaching and come help bail me out of the business, which she did an amazing job of. And so we, continued to operate it and had a great business there. That's where you and I met, Jaron. You helped me with plenty of evictions and landlord tenant issues. We got more than a whole podcast worth of those stories.
Yeah, sure.
And then, again, sort of lifestyle change. And, I had accomplished it. My goal was, okay, can I build something myself? Can I
And then you had
scratch
some
that entrepreneurial niche, right?
Yeah.
And my first daughter had been born, and my wife stepped out of the business to go be a mom, which was amazing. And it's just interesting how the world works. I had said at the beginning of the year, all right, I'm going to clean this up. We had some clients we didn't love. We had some properties we didn't love to manage. I was going to, tighten up the portfolio, get the operations cleaned up, and then sell it maybe after a year. And 60 days later, somebody called me and said, hey, would you ever think about selling that business? And I said, well, everything's for sale for a price kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And they gave me an offer, and it was more than I thought the business was worth. And so that's always the time to sell.
That was it. Wow.
And that was it. So we sold that business really quickly. And I had a non-compete from that. So that was when
How long was the non-compete?
A year.
A year, okay.
And that's not bad. And so that's when I decided, maybe I'll just do some real estate sales. I was prohibited from doing management, but not from selling real estate.
Are you happy you sold it?
Yeah, that was my question.
Absolutely.
Looking back on it.
Yeah.
It's always the question for everyone that sells stuff. Yeah.
Yes. But it was interesting. Here's my response to that. Now, yes.
Okay.
And also the learning lesson that I took away from that was I regretted it the second the check cleared.
Yeah.
I put the money in the bank, and I like, it's one of those like, hey, we sold the business, great, right? And
now what?
Well, it was one, you go,
but it's recurring cash flow every month, isn't it? That's nice.
It was, and it wasn't so much the cash flow, was I had built it.
Your baby.
And it also was one of those, it was also a big realization to go, it wasn't enough money. I wasn't retiring, right? Off of it. It was a nice amount of money, but it wasn't life-changing. And you go, okay, this is a different thought process, right? I had never thought about, well, what happens after you sell? Yeah. The goal is always, well, you build it and then you sell it. And then you go, okay, well, this isn't enough money. So now we have to do this again. Yeah. Now we have to do it bigger, right? And now we have to, figure out how to really
reinvent yourself. Yeah. You're reinventing yourself each time with each of these.
And that part I love, because to me, I have no ego around or attachment in the sense of like, I never thought I was the world's greatest property manager or anything like that. But it was a learning lesson. So now, yes, at that time, I was less sure.
Have you ever had thoughts to try to rebuild a property management business, or is that not?
I unintentionally ended up building up a second portfolio after that, and then unwound that because I found that,
Not for you.
It was anymore. Not the property management business was not for me. I'm great at getting the clients. I sold a lot of investment property, which then people said, well, can you manage this for me? And that's how I sort of ended up back into it. But we ended up the second time building up to about 100 units under management.
Wow. It's amazing.
And then I just unwound it. Yeah. I didn't even sell at that time. I just sort of found good referral partners.
Take this over.
That was within the past few years, or?
Yeah. So that would have been.
Because you were managing property when I met you.
So that would have been.
The past 5 years.
2019. There you go. 2019 into 2020.
Yeah. Okay.
So in a short period of time, a year or so, you build up 100 units, more or less?
Well, and again, my transition was, okay, let me get into real estate sales. Right. I had finally got to that point of being like, all right, I'm gonna do real estate sales.
Yeah.
And I started sort of saying, I've got this non-compete. I could sell real estate. How hard could that be? Right. And just sort of.
We can talk about that too.
Yeah. And just sort of putting some deals together, and then said, all right, this is a real business. I could really grow this, right? And that sort of got the spark again for me, is to go, okay, I can see how I can really scale this and build a big real estate sales business. And so then we sort of set down that path.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was 2018. 2018 was my first year hanging up a shingle as a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Sold about $4 million that first year.
Nice.
And then we basically doubled for each of the next 4 years.
Great.
So Larry, when you and I met, that was end of 2019, beginning of 2020, right? Yep, just before COVID.
Yep.
February 2020, Larry and I met. So 2019, I had sold 37 properties, like $9.5 million.
Wow.
And then 2020 was when I decided to build a team and really scale. We got up to $20 million, 84 properties. And the year after that, we did 34 million, 128 properties.
That's incredible. I didn't even know that you were getting to those stratospheric heights. Awesome.
Yeah, that's a lot
great.
Of property sold.
That is a lot of property
sold. We built that business really great. I had amazing team members.
Yeah.
And that was.
And you were under the Keller Williams brand at that time?
Yeah, that time.
Before you took over the office, which we'll get to in a minute. But okay.
That's when Dan and I met, right as he was making the decision to move to KW. Actually, we kind of knew each other before that.
We had met on. We met on the trip. So Keller Williams had flown a few people who were not Keller Williams agents out to one of their conferences.
Okay.
And Larry and I were both guests at that time, and we met there.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Before we leave the property management, because I kind of in my head, I like to kind of do it in time sequence. So the property management, you don't really, looking back on it, you don't regret it. You made your money. That's great. Are there any other lessons that you take from having a business like that, which is, very, I don't know, it's different than running a team or doing coaching now, but I don't know. Are there any positives or negatives? What were the challenges? What did you learn from that lesson being an owner?
So many lessons.
Yeah.
One, it was the start of how do you build a team for this, right? That you need a lot of different specialties and you need people. and you need people.
Dan and I have talked at length about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
A second thing, I think, on a personal level, I learned when you get in the property management business, you really come face to face with how a very wide segment of the population lives, right? You're intimately involved in their day-to-day lives. Who's having children, who's going through loss, who's got jobs, who doesn't have jobs, who's getting, financial assistance and all kinds of other things. So that was really eye-opening. I think I probably learned more about being a good human from the property management business than I learned any business lessons.
I think it can either make you really jaded and hate human beings to your core, or you have to become much more empathetic and understanding and loving, and so you can go in one of two routes.
And I would argue it does. I would argue. I don't know. I would argue it goes through both, right?
Maybe different stages.
Yes,
it's like grief and and anger. It's like the stage of loss and mourning.
You go through both.
And then coming out on the other side and being a better human. And loving people.
And the property management business is also tough. I think any management business is tough because you're trapped in the middle. Yeah. Right.
Between expectations of the owner,
and the
expectations of the
tenant, right? No one's ever happy in that in that dynamic.
It's a thankless business,
and you also have to abide by the law.
So and the law, right? And right. But you end up with a lot of situations where there were a lot of situations. I think ultimately it started to become the frustration that probably led me to just say, like, we got to be done with this. You end up in these situations where you go, I would do it differently. But it's not it's not my call to make, right? I can present the facts, I can make the case, but it's the landlord gets to decide, do they write the check or not write the check, and how to deal with the situation. And so I think that ultimately is like the biggest challenge of that business. It's also just from a business standpoint for anybody who wants to be in the property management business, it has an interesting scaling challenge, which was why I ultimately sold, which is, when you're building it and you're staffing it, you staff at a level and then you can manage a certain number of properties and do a good job, right? And so then as the owner, you up to that level of revenue, you have fairly predictable profitability because you have the recurring revenue aspect. However, then you max out and you have to
get to the next level.
And so you have to go through this period where you have to staff in advance. And so now you're not making the money that you were or would like to, and you got to go back on the sales offensive. Sure. And every business has an element of that, but I think it's really challenging in the property management business because the stakes are so high and the number of people involved is so great that people won't suffer for poor service because you're scaling.
And part of it is that it's what I call like a commoditized business, where it's like a commodity, meaning there's so many property managers out there that that you can't really charge more than 10% at the max. That's like your mom and pop customer that maybe has one or two properties. Maybe you can hit them for the 10%. But then from there, you have your more sophisticated clients that have 10 and 12 and 20 properties. You've got to lower your fees for those down to 8% or 7%, and then maybe the bigger portfolios, 30, 50, 100 units, you're doing at a flat fee, maybe $75 a door, $100 a door or something. So, and you're right. Like if your service slips a little bit, they'll just go somewhere else.
Yep. Absolutely.
And they're shopping you, and very few of them are probably going to call one property manager and be like, "Oh yes, 10%. Okay, absolutely. Here, take my business."
It's a bit of a relationship business too. Like for me, like I went through multiple property managers, and I eventually kind of hired a guy that didn't have experience at first, but had his brokerage license, and I knew his personality.
Sure.
And I knew him for a long time and had a trust element, and he said, yeah, I'll do this. So we built that business together. Jaron hired him. Jaron gave him a bunch of clients. I gave him a bunch of clients. Guy has 200 apartments that he manages now, or more than that, I think, 250, whatever. And he does it himself with some partners. But I know that this guy is going to do a good job because he's the guy touching everything. Yep. And his intention, at least as far as I know it, isn't to do what you discussed, which is like, all right, we're going to get to 2,000 apartments. I'm going to have like 10 guys, and Larry, you're going to be dealing directly with said guy that I just hired that actually doesn't
corporate. His intention is to be corporate. It's to have a nice second income because he's got another job, which we won't discuss on the side.
There's also with the property management, there's that I think that it's very different skills to be able, there's two distinct skills in property management: turnarounds and stable operations, right? And that was one thing I learned about myself from that. I'm not a stable operations like I'm just not geared that way. It just
your sprints
excite me, right?
Sprints,
so I'd rather go hard. Jaron, you and I think one of the first times we connected was a property that I took over pretty early in the property management business. 30 units, and we ended up doing 26 evictions over the year. Right? I mean, I was on the first name basis with the sheriff, and
had his cell.
Hey Dan, we got an appointment on Friday.
I mean, we were
next
Friday.
See you next week. Got 2 or 3 next week.
And honestly, that was one of my favorites, right? Because I loved that. When it comes, I love.
So you love the challenge. You love diving in.
I love the challenge. Yeah, it's something different every day. There's things are always popping up. And you can see you're making progress. Like we took a property, and by the time you repaint it and you renovate the units and you go from we're not collecting any rent to now we're collecting all the rent. That's great. And then then it goes to a different phase, which is like, okay, well, we just sort of need to maintain this and don't let things slip, but also don't spend any money, and it becomes a different game. And I think it's a different personality that's good at that. So I think for anybody who's in the property management business, that might be something I would say to consider. If anybody was looking at it, as you could probably make a really good business being the turnaround person, and then finding someone you partner with longer term who has the scale, who has the infrastructure already built, and say, once it's stable, I'll give it to you and
get recurring revenue from that,
kind of referral fee or something. Yeah,
there's a guy we know. Actually, maybe we should get him on this podcast. He specializes in just the turnaround piece. Right, so he comes in and does mostly like big institutional buildings, but he's the turnaround guy, and he has a whole crew, and they have contracts signed, and they do the turns for every single unit in the building. The manager manages, the turnaround guy does the turnaround. Wow. Yeah, it's that straightforward.
Yeah, they're very different skill sets.
Yeah,
and I think that was something I learned about myself too. I like that, like you said, I like a good sprint. I'm not a distance runner. Once it's up and running, I should probably get out of the way and go work on something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's know thyself. That's good.
Yeah, it's know thyself, exactly. And that's good to know. And maybe, in the future you'll figure that out. The exit strategy, maybe exit a little different way depending on what you're building, and maybe there's a way to start building more recurring revenue or whatever that is. So but anyway, so let's move on to your property management.
That's the fun part about business.
Yeah. For sure. Always learning.
Always learning, yeah.
For me, and I don't, this is kind of, I think you too, but like for me, it's always been do all these activities to acquire a bigger portfolio and like have a skill set. So that way I own a bunch of stuff long-term, and then I can just like go away, where it's not even like, I didn't even assign value to my Brokerage business until recently. I was just doing it to raise cash to go buy more buildings. I thought of, and I actually had managed I was managing 20 of mine and then like 10 of somebody else's. And I got the taste, and I was just like, whoa, this is, because again, the idea was if I manage a bunch of these, I know who's selling, you get to do more brokerage business or you get to buy them. And then you're just innately in tune to this is what this is renting for. This is how difficult this is to rent. And now you're like just super dialed in on how to acquire property, right? So that to me was like always the initial thought. Do all this to acquire more assets, and then whatever happens to these other businesses, fine. I got all these real estate deals, but the reality is they're worth something when you put all this work into it. And I didn't even consider that until maybe a year and a half ago. Yeah. So yeah.
And your business, obviously, like you said, your business is worth something. It's not just the monthly cash flow that you're getting in from it. It's that someone will assign a value to it ultimately that you can sell it. And, it is. I mean, our law firm is worth something. I don't know if it's 2x EBITDA or 3x or 1.5x or whatever it is. I don't hyper focus on that because I'm not thinking of exiting for 20 years. But it's when you build something, there's almost always someone that finds value in it.
That's one of the things that Adam, who we both know, real estate coach, or just general coach, business coach, kind of put in my head early on. It's like, hey, begin with the end in mind on some level, right? Like, hey, like this is a sellable thing. So when you're making decisions, think about it from that lens a little bit at least. So that way you make decisions that's building the value of this asset that you're pouring your life into. I mean, I work a bazillion hours a week, right? So might as well be worth something when it's done, right?
Agreed.
So.